The People's Business is made possible by our partners, Solar Dynamics, the most efficient energy systems.
It's been touted as the first step in putting power back into the hands of the people. It's the Thorne Commission on Local Governance, which was launched over a year ago to oversee the setting up of community-based people's assemblies. Good evening. I am Peter Thorne, and this week on the People's Business, we focus on the work of the Thorne Commission with some very special guests. There are Chairman of the Commission, Mr. Ralph Thorne. Mr. Thorne?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. Good evening, and good evening to everyone. Good
evening, and a pleasure having you on the program. We are also joined by Deputy Chairman and Barbados' Ambassador to CARICOM, His Excellency David.
Good evening, Peter. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Okay, thank you, and it's a pleasure to have you on the program. We also have members of the Commission. It's Crystal Howell. Crystal?
Good night, everyone.
Good night, a pleasure to have you on the program. And we also are joined by Mr. Barney Gibbs, a member of the Commission.
Good evening, Peter. Thank you.
Yes, pleasure. And we'll be back with the People's Business Live in just a moment. Welcome back to the People's Business as we discuss the Thorne Commission on Local Governance. This question goes out to the panel, but I'm going to let Mr. Ralph Thorne lead off. How would you describe the work of the Commission a year on?
Arduous, committed. We're all convicted in the idea that Barbados needs to have local government. In fact, I think all 11 of us feel that the time has long passed when we should have had local government. So every one of the 11 members of this commission is approaching the reality that we should have local government with some excitement. And we've, as you know, we've been having public consultations. I'm probably going ahead of you, but just by way of introduction, we have met in 8 parishes. We still have 3 parishes left. And the good thing about this program tonight is that this can serve as one of our public consultations.
And can you tell us what are those 3 parishes that are left?
St. Joseph, St. John, and this is not deliberate. What's the other one, Crystal? St. Thomas. Yes, St. Joseph, St. John, and St. Thomas. Just about when the lockdown came along, we were about to go to St. Thomas, and you know what happened over the last 4 months.
Okay. The other members of the commission, how do you feel about your work a year on? David?
Well, we are making progress. The COVID-19 pandemic brought a little pause to our work, and we are now trying to get back on track. We were holding town hall meetings, physical town hall meetings. So we recognize that we're not going to be able to finish off our series of town hall meetings with physical meetings, but we're going to use the communications technology. Our aim is to have our report into the Cabinet of Barbados by the 30th of November of this year. So we want to make it an independence present to the people of Barbados. Once we're getting our report, it will go before Cabinet, and Cabinet will either approve it just as it is, or it's possible Cabinet might make some modifications. But it is our intention and hope that the system will be operationalized sometime during the course of 2021.
Okay, well said. Ambassador Commission, Ms. Sowell, your thoughts? A year on, you were launched in mid-July last year. How did that go for you in terms of the commission, its work?
Found the interaction with the public to be quite interesting, hearing all of the different views from persons all over Barbados. And you would think after going to 8 town halls that you would have heard the same thing over and over. Every parish brought something different to the table and something new for us to consider. And I was glad that we made the effort to make sure that everyone's voices was heard. I also appreciate now that COVID has arrived, that we've been forced to embrace the technology even more, because I know that was something a lot of persons don't like to consider or see it as a tokenism. But now we've been forced to embrace it and to use it to our advantage to get the word out as much as possible. So I'm hoping that persons will log on to our Facebook and Instagram handles so that they can find out all the information that they need to know about anything we're doing going.
Okay, no problem. Mr. Gibbs, how did you take the work of the commission within the first year or so?
Well, Peter, just to pick up on what Ambassador Commission said regarding COVID, what I find myself considering these days is how much different or improved our response to COVID could have been if we had a system of local government in place all now. A lot of the delivery of services could be, I would say, more targeted if the people's assemblies that are being proposed were already in place. So I find that the COVID epidemic has put that in sharp focus for all of us.
Okay, I want to ask, do you get the impression, even though you've only had 8 town hall meetings, that Barbadians really want power devolved from central government into their hands?
I would say
There's no doubt about that.
Go ahead.
Definitely,
Go ahead,
yes.
Raz.
Okay. Yes, we've gone to 8 parishes, Peter, and in every parish, there's been unanimity that the people feel, and I like the term you use, to have power devolved down to the people of Barbados. And certainly in terms of the delivery of services, the reason we've gone to parishes is that we want the assemblies, let us call them people's assemblies, that is what we are proposing. We want the local government to be based on parishes. We feel that the parishes have a historically determined identity, and that is why we are moving on a parish basis as opposed to a constituency basis, and we're doing that deliberately to avoid the stain or the contamination of partisan politics. And you'll hear us speak a lot about that tonight, that we want the people's assemblies to be distant from partisan politics. Every parish feels that that should be the case. It makes us, Peter, different not only from the last system that we've had in Barbados, but it makes us different from all of the other Caribbean islands that have local government. I suspect, and I make bold to say, that this will probably be the first system of local government in the Caribbean that is not based on partisan politics.
Peter,
Go ahead, David.
if I may, Peter, I just want to follow up because I too like the term you use, putting power in the hands of the people. And I want to make this point at the very outset of this discussion, that this system of people's assembly is not simply your typical local government system that tends to be just about the delivery of services. This is much more ambitious than that. Our starting point is the fact that the Barbadian population is an extremely, it's a literate, well-educated, well-trained, intelligent population, very compact, that is capable of making a much bigger input into national governance. And so, Peter, we have set out to achieve 7 objectives. And I would like to put those objectives on the table very early, because at the end of our discussion, we should be reflecting on whether we are meeting, whether what we have conceived is meeting those 7 objectives. And if I may, the first one,
Sure.
assert and insist upon a greater measure of accountability in our national governance affairs. Secondly, engage in a more people participatory form of national and community level governance. Third, take active measures to ensure that high standards are always upheld in our national public service. 5, more readily contribute our creativity, intelligence, and energy to the administration of the public affairs of our country. 5, take collective responsibility for delivering critical services to our own communities. 6, undertake responsibility for protecting the welfare and well-being of our neighborhoods and neighbors. And number 7, participate in collective decision-making and administrative activities that are designed to foster a healthy sense of social and national unity. So when you look at those objectives tell you that we are really seeking the empowerment of the citizenry of Barbados. Yes, to help deliver services to their communities, but to go way beyond that, to hold the public service accountable, to have an input into national affairs, including matters that are before the Parliament of Barbados. So very ambitious, but we think based on the talent of the Barbadian population, very achievable.
Okay, now, do you have any ideas on average how many Barbadians have been flocking in terms of numbers to take part in the new initiative in terms of the town hall meetings? On average, you have any idea as to what the attendance was?
It varied from parish to parish, David. It varied from parish to parish, but I want to sing the praises of St. James. I think we had the largest turnout at the West Terrace Primary School. And not only was it a large turnout, but there was such great enthusiasm. Certainly the people of St. James demonstrated by numbers and by enthusiasm that it is something long overdue, and it is something that they would definitely be interested in. I tend to remember St. Lucie, for example. We had a cadre of very young people who came out, and it really reminded me of the social activism of the 70s. They came out and they were very keen to be a part of a system of local government. But if we had about 60, 70 in West Terrace, I think that would have been the largest turnout. We would have, I don't know, we're averaging around what, 30, 40? But we're not going to be distracted by quantities when the quality is so outstanding.
One of the reasons I wanted Crystal to weigh in here is because we didn't only have people physically present, we also had people logged in on the internet, the social media. So I think Crystal should speak a little bit about that.
Yes, the
Go ahead,
had the major activity we would have had would have been on the Facebook because of the streaming that we would have been doing. And it gave persons the opportunity, whether they could come out physically or not, to still participate and pose their questions. And you even would have had persons who were overseas, but interested in being able to participate, give their contributions using that medium. So we were able to take comments from those channels and be able to add it to the other suggestions that we would have collated during the physical meetings as well.
Okay, this is an irreversible fact that the local government system was abolished back in 1969. This is 51 years later. Successive governments run by both the Barbados Labour Party and the Democratic Labour Party have not reintroduced any local government system. An attempt was made at the constituency council level with the former government of the late Prime Minister David Thompson. Is it coming through, even though you have said that you're going to make the recommendations an independence presence for Barbados in 2020? Is it coming through that half a century later, successive governments have made an error in abolishing the local government system back in 1969?
I wouldn't say it was an error. I would say that these are different times. Barbadians are far more educated and aware and willing to have a say in what is happening within their communities beyond just voting every 5 years. We have the intelligence and we have the capability to have a decentralized system that gives us the ability to say if we want this particular project done or if we would like this infrastructure implemented. We should not have to be waiting on a minister or different forms of government to be able to make these very simple decisions for ourselves. We have the ability to make these decisions, and I think now will be the time persons are going to hopefully embrace being able to have the authority to be able to say, we recognize this is what our community needs, and we are going to make the decision, this is what we want implemented. Having to wait for a hierarchy to have those simple decisions made is long overdue, that we should be able to do those things for ourselves.
Peter, I would agree with you. I would agree with you that it was an error. So I'm disagreeing with Krista. I think it was an error because every country really does need, in addition to a system of central government, every country does need a system that allows the ordinary citizens in their communities to have some level of community-based governance and involvement. So I think Barbados did take a retrograde step when we abolished the system of local government. Maybe it needed modification, but you know, there was the saying that the abolition was predicated on this idea that if you couldn't get Motley out of the city, you took away the city from Motley. You know, so there's a feeling that it was a very partisan decision that was made about abolishing the local government system as a way of getting rid of the power base of Dyke and Motley. Now, but the fact that both the previous Democratic Labour Party administration and this Barbados Labour Party administration sees the need for some system of local governance tells you that it is a common sentiment that is really bipartisan. Now, we have grave difficulties with the system of constituency councils that was implemented by the last administration. So we wish a system that is less driven by partisan politics. We want a system that is based on the democratic principle of elections. We don't want any minister handpicking members of any local government council. So we have a different concept. It must be separate from central government power and influence, and it must be based on the democratic principle of the people voting for and choosing their own representatives. But I think it is clear. I think we can clearly say that there's an acceptance across the political divide in Barbados that Barbados does need some system of local governance.
Mr. Thorne?
I think worth making as well, when drawing comparisons with the system 50 years ago, that there are technologies and softwares and applications that are available now that would help to make the process of ensuring democracy a bit easier to accomplish. I mean, if you look at the neighborhood as a microcosm for a parish, you're seeing now in many neighborhoods across Barbados where people are organizing using, for example, WhatsApp, and organizing their neighborhood watches and their recycling projects using a simple technology like that. Local councils overseas have platforms such as Fix My Street and citysource.com where persons can log on and report their street lights being out or water outages, power outages, and the like. So these technologies exist now that would take some friction out of the system and just make that whole delivery of services more efficient in a way that wouldn't have existed before with the vestry system.
Okay, Mr. Thorne, I must get your view on this as the only elected MP on the show.
You tried to drag me into a political discussion, Peter. Look, Professor George Beckford, speaking of Caribbean integration many years ago, said that the people of the Caribbean are already integrated. It was just the governments who did not know it. I want to adapt that statement to the question of local government and say to you that the people in Barbados were for a long time practicing local government, but it is just that the governments did not know. I grew up in the 1970s when every community in Barbados had a club, whether it was a cricket club, they used to call them social and cultural clubs. The communities were highly organized and they were organizing themselves in very wholesome activity. We take cricket for granted, we take football clubs for granted, but that is a form of social organization which tells you that the people have been long equipped and have long been interested in managing their affairs at the local level. The fact that the sporting associations in Barbados, for example, have been able to have competitions over 100 years uninterrupted would tell you that there has been a high level of social organization in Barbados, so that I posit the view that we have long had local government, whether it has been official or unofficial. Over the last 50 years, it has been unofficial, but it has been a form of local government. We've had clubs organizing young people, giving meaning to the lives of young people in their communities. I grew up in a part of St. Michael in which we used to have sponsored walks. We used to clean the community. We used to organize events for old people. The old people used to organize day camps for young people during the long vacation, not summer. We don't have summer here. And that was a level of social organization which tells me that for a long time we have practiced forms of local government, and we're only going to formalize it now. The question is, are people as interested? Are people as committed to the idea of governing their own affairs? We think they are, but the test will come when government implements this. And to be quite frank with you, I say when, because I frankly speaking don't think government has a choice but to do this for the sake of Barbados, to do this for the sake of Barbadians in their local communities, and to remind them that they have the skills and they are equipped to manage their own affairs.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back with the People's Business Live in just a moment. Welcome back to the People's Business Live, which this week is focusing on the Thorne Commission on Local Governance with Chairman MP Ralph Thorne, Deputy Chairman and Barbados' Ambassador to CARICOM, His Excellency David Commission, and Commission members Crystal Howell and Barney Gibbs. And remember, Barbadians, you can call us at 228-5562 or 228-5563, and we'll be only too happy to welcome your calls. At the launch last year, PM Motley said, "We can only grow if the voices of our people are heard." Do you believe this commission is creating a platform for participation and empowerment of our people?
Most
Definitely.
David listed the deeper objectives earlier, and if you don't mind, Peter, let us begin at the very basic level of delivery of services. I think Barney may have hinted at this. Over the past few months and years in Barbados, people have been preoccupied with the arrival of the sanitation truck into their neighborhood. People have been concerned about the times that buses will come into the community. These are areas people have been concerned about the delivery of water into their communities. At the very basic level, we think that the people can manage in conjunction with the state the delivery of these services as a starting point. Yes, and as I said before, the time is long past when that partnership should have been occurring between the people and the state and its agencies.
Peter, if I may, because I think we need to give the viewers a better idea of the structure that we are contemplating. So we are thinking about we are thinking of having 20 people's assemblies right across the length and breadth of Barbados. Assemblies will be elected by the people. We have already had a meeting with the Electoral and Boundaries Commission, so the elections will be under their auspices. We are thinking that each People's Assembly would have approximately 30 members, elected members. And then we have looked at what would be the functions of these assemblies. And I'll just give you the headings really. So the first function, oversight of government agencies that provide critical services to the people. So we're talking about oversight committees made up of councillors that would have some oversight over government institutions that are critical: Queen Elizabeth Hospital, polyclinics, the bus service, the water authority. Secondly, community well-being teams. Each People's Assembly will put together an extensive team of persons that will ensure that no member of that community falls through the cracks. Environment and Road Repairs Committee. So that will be a committee that will deal with matters pertaining to the environment and minor road repairs. Education. We expect the People's Assemblies to be consulted by the Ministry of Education in appointing school boards. We expect the People's Assembly to have representatives on the school boards. And we also expect the Assembly members that have some input into education to form an education task force to generate positive ideas for the development of education. Community development and sports. We want to structure a partnership between the People's Assembly, Community Development Department, National Sports Council, National Cultural Foundation, to put in place sports, community and artistic programs for the community, and especially to make use of the community centers. Licenses, vendors' licenses, for example, areas away from the established markets. We want the assemblies to have the power to give out vendors' licenses. Community forum. We want the assembly in collaboration with the members of parliament to have quarterly forums where the people come together to discuss national affairs, where the assembly has an opportunity to report to the people, where the people can have input into parliamentary bills that are before the House of Assembly and the Senate, for example. Planning Commission, where there where the town and country planning is looking at, projects that have implications for the environment of the assembly area, that the assembly must be consulted. When government departments are looking at putting together development plans for the assembly area, that the assembly must be consulted. What roads does the community need? What road repairs? What recreation centers, etc. And the final two, we feel that each assembly should be able to put together a kind of people's business or people's cooperative, whether it's a food producing cooperative farm that the young people can come together and engage in, or some other type of community business. And finally, a suggestion that came out of our town hall meetings, that the People's Assembly can re-energize the neighborhood watch function that used to happen in communities across Barbados, where especially the young men could be involved in looking after the safety and security of the community, perhaps with some training from the Royal Barbados Police Force in security matters and so forth. So those are the kinds of functions that we are looking at, Peter. And if those functions are implemented, we will be taking a giant step in the empowerment of the ordinary citizens of Barbados.
It will envisage that we will have 4 assemblies, St. Michael and 3 in Christchurch.
Yes.
So, yes, that's correct. That's correct. Let's start with the parishes that will only have 1, because the fundamental principle is organization on a parish basis. But some parishes, because of the population, the large population of some parishes, we have to move away from simply 1 parish-wide assembly. But the parishes, the smaller parishes in terms of population, St. Lucy, St. Andrew, help me guys, St. Lucy,
St.
Andrew,
St. John, and St. Thomas.
St. Thomas.
They will have
Those
one
are 1.
parish-wide assembly. I'll let the others take you through the rest of the system.
So the parishes of St. George, St. Peter, St. Philip, and St. James will have 2 assemblies. Christchurch will have 3, and St. Michael will have 4 because of how densely populated that area is. We have had some of the communities we go to make arguments for having more, and we've had some make arguments for having less. Interestingly enough, St. Andrew was adamant that they should have 2 assemblies because of the differences and the nuances in their culture. They believe that they should have 2, and we've had some parishes that think that there are way too many. So it's been interesting how persons have been viewing the division of the assemblies and how many they think will be suitable. And some have come with research based on assemblies, similar community assemblies that have been set up in other countries. And hopefully more persons do that as opposed to coming with feeling, because there really isn't much you can do with feelings if you feel it's too much or if you feel it's too little. But having a basis or a reason for what you think, like the example that St. Andrew gave, whether they think it is suitable or not.
Is it likely that because you have to hand in your report and you said you're earmarking November 30th, is it likely that you are going to get these assemblies up and running in next year? We are almost in midterm into this administration. And you have COVID now.
The remainder of the town halls are all going to be happening this month, with the first one happening next Sunday, and the following Sunday after that will be, so we have St. Thomas first on August 9th, and then we have St. John on the 17th and St. Joseph on the 30th. We've already had a subcommittee start to collate all of the different submissions that we would have had, and to start the process, so it's not as though we're going to be going from scratch, to start the process of what suggestions we'd like to include and which ones we thought would be most helpful with revamping the initial proposal that we would have had. So then having these 3 assemblies would just be adding to that so that we can meet that November deadline. We're really hoping that persons will participate, as this is the last 3 opportunities to do so. this one included before. But we really want to hear not just the reasons you think it would work, but also the reasons you think it won't work. Because coming from those suggestions, we've been able to find solutions for the different things that persons think will be a hamper to the People's Assemblies working. Because if everybody comes with the positive, then we won't be adequately prepared for the negative. So we've had suggestions on how to deal with the issues of persons trying to enforce partisan opinions and politics. And we've been reinforcing the importance of persons voting for those who will have the community's best interests at heart and not just voting for someone who would have a political agenda. We have had persons argue about the ability to have the ear of the different government agencies that we will be dealing with, and that's something we definitely need to make sure we have under control, because we don't want the system to be frustrated by any kind of red tape or bottleneck. So having all of that input helps us to be able to come up with a solution that best works for the people of Barbados.
Okay, I have
Crystal,
several questions.
sorry, Peter, what time do we begin next
Sorry.
week?
But we
Starting time.
go from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. and I've been able to keep a very tight clock on most of the town halls. There's only one that got away, but we do keep a very strict schedule because we try to respect people's times. I know we're Caribbean people, but there are people who get to these things very early or on time, and we don't want them to be disadvantaged by having to wait on other persons to join. So we start at 5 sharp and we end at 7. Online.
Okay, Okay, I have several other questions, but we are going to take another break and we'll be back with the People's Business Live in just a moment. Welcome back to the People's Business Live as we continue our discussion on the Thorne Commission on Local Governance. And remember, you can call us at 228-5562 or 228-5563. We'll be only too happy to welcome your calls. And just a note of housekeeping, the media conference held earlier today by Health Minister, the Minister of Health and Wellness, Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Bostic, is to be rebroadcast at 9:30 p.m. tonight, Sunday. So that's the media conference held by Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Bostic to be rebroadcast at 9:30 tonight. I want to ask the panel, where will the Assembly derive their financing from? Before I go to that, we have a call on the line. Good evening, you are on the People's Business Live.
Good night.
Good night.
Hello.
Same question that you just asked, but let me paraphrase a little bit. Right now, we know that the central government is responsible for all the expenditures in various ministries. So one of the questions that I would like to find out exactly where the financing will come from to at least finance these assemblies, And if these assemblies will be divided up similar to how the old vestry system was pronounced, where you had the southern, northern, so that you'd have a situation outside of the parishes, outside of the constituencies, you'd name the parishes and you'd name the wards. So if the panel could just give an insight into the ways of the finance, would be extremely important, based on the fact which I've mentioned that central government at the moment through its ministries are responsible for all the financing of the various things that was mentioned by Ambassador Commission. I'll wait your answer.
As to your latter
thank you very much for your
question,
thoughts.
we had a meeting just last week with the Electoral and Boundaries Commission, and we're taking advice from the Electoral and Boundaries Commission as to the divisions, as to how they're going to divide St. Michael, for example, and the borders that they're going to provide us with. So we are deferring to the Electoral and Boundaries Commission on that. The question of financing, anybody else wants to take that? David, Barney?
Well, the first point that we should make is that service on the People's Assembly will be absolutely voluntary. So assemblymen and women will not be paid any wage or any fees. We envisaged each assembly receiving an annual vote, an annual budget from central government. We expect it to be a relatively modest sum, because we all appreciate the financial situation that obtains in the country. We also anticipate that in addition to its annual budget from central government, that assemblies would be at liberty to engage in forms of fundraising, or even to receive financial donations from entities, for example, businesses and other entities within the assembly area, for example. But a lot of the functions of the People's Assembly are functions that will not necessarily call for a lot of money. A lot of it is really about people coming together to organize themselves, to do things together, to empower themselves through, and to empower their communities through organization and collective work. Obviously, some of the functions that the assemblies will perform will take some of the pressure off of existing government ministries and departments. So, to some extent, as we take that pressure off, you would simply be transferring some of the funds that you would otherwise have needed to spend in those ministries or departments, transferring those funds towards the People's Assemblies, which will be taken up some of that slack. So right now, we are not in a position to give definite figures as to what the budget of each People's Assembly would be, but no doubt that that's a matter that Cabinet will look at, and determinations will be made based on the financial realities of Barbados.
Okay, we have another call on the line.
I'd like to add to that. I'd like to add to that quickly, Peter. The cost would be administrative. To maintain a secretariat, and I need to clarify, we need to clarify, Peter, that if roadworks are being done in an area, for example, it is not the People's Assembly that is doing the roadworks. It is the People's Assembly that is sending a requisition to the Ministry of Transport and Works to come and effect the roadwork. So I don't want the public to go away with the belief that there's a large budget going to these People's Assemblies for them to engage in work that central government is doing. Central government will continue to do the work, except that the People's Assembly will mediate between central government and the needs of the community. And the cost will be, I think, administrative, no more than administrative.
So there's no overlapping?
Correct. So we've had situations before where you have, for example, the same road works, and persons in the community are wondering, but why is this road being dealt with when this road is in a much more serious condition and is more used by the community? Even the road works done on the area that is currently looking at is something that would not be beneficial at all. So in essence, you might actually be saving the government some money by making sure situations like that don't occur. And we've heard these stories time and time again, where the consultation with the persons within the community who are the ones that are using these resources are not consulted, or they're consulted after the fact, after the money's been already spent, and then you're now trying after the fact to get things done. So this is not the idea to make it seem as though you're doubling up. You are just making sure that the resources that government have are going where they are most needed by the community.
Okay, we're going to go to the phone lines and take the reaction and questions from Barbadians. Good evening, you are on the People's Business Line.
Good evening, Peter. Good evening, panel.
Good evening, panel. Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Mr. Commissioner David, I like how you put forward the idea about the assemblies. Does it mean then that the constituency, what do you call it? Constituency area, very different governments represent different areas. Do that be done away with then altogether? And the next thing too is that yes, you know, have these assemblies, but I also believe in this community and in touch with your community, because you never know what can happen to each and everyone in the community that you live. Because where you live, many things have happened in terms of burglaries and so on. And when I checked with one or two of the neighbors, I asked them if they were heard anything. They said no. So I always believe that, you know, one should always be in touch with each other, because you never know what can happen to someone down the road, next door, or whatever your case may be. And I think it's very, very vitally important that we really keep in touch with each other in our community in particular. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for your call. Any reaction, panel?
Where that last comment is concerned, he's really talking about the community well-being teams. And I think that is going to be a very important function of the People's Assembly. The idea of the community well-being teams and a principle of the People's Assemblies is that even though the Assembly might be 30 persons, the Assembly is going to have the power to co-opt members of the community into subcommittees of the Assembly to help with the work. So, for example, the community well-being team, we would expect that to be a relatively large entity whose job it will be, as I said, to ensure that no member of the community falls through the cracks. And during our town hall meetings, we got suggestions that these well-being teams should also be on the lookout for things like child abuse, domestic violence, should have an interest in the cultural welfare of the community, the psychological welfare of the community, all aspects of the well-being of the community. And so, yes, we really, that's the idea, where we bring the community together, we organize ourselves to take care of our neighborhoods and our neighbors. So that's that particular I wanted to touch on.
Okay, we have another call on the line. Good evening, you are on the People's Business Line.
Good evening to you. The idea of
Good evening, sir.
The idea of local government is a very good one, and if ever it is going to be started, it is now to have it started. Because at this point, we don't want to make it political. We are holding all the members of the assembly together. In politics, there's fully BLP, which is in power. What happened with that stopped the local government last time is that those local governments who were opposition to whoever was the parliamentary representative were the ones who were not getting anything done. We don't have that problem though. But I don't think that this government would always be as it is. So if we set the platform now and let the people realize that it is non-political, it will make a good platform for moving forward. The other thing is, it is a good time to employ a lot of these small businesses. Like, for instance, if there's a house that needs repairs within the house in the community, local government could get a local guy from the same village to do the repairs at a nominal fee. If the road repairs, you can get a local company to do these things instead of looking for the big businesses to do. They do the major work, but the smaller work, the smaller guys can. This is what we need to look for. The one other thing I think that we should do is, before we look at electing anyone or selecting or voting for them, they should come to the various parishes and let them know what their contribution to the local government is going to be.
Okay, thank you very much for your call.
Peter, that caller sounds like
panel?
the perfect candidate. He sounds like the perfect candidate to sit on a People's Assembly.
I'm actually glad that he brought up that. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I'm glad that he brought up the mention of criteria, because that is something we've also been emphasizing, because persons need to ensure that the candidate that they are voting for fits a criteria that has a history of community interest, of effort, of results, so that they are not voting for someone who looks fancy on paper but have never actually contributed anything to their community. There are persons within your community who have been already organizing with different small businesses, large businesses, getting things done, and their voices are not heard or they're not recognized. Those are the kind of people that you should be electing to be sitting on these assemblies, so that they can help to continue to grow your community. I cannot emphasize enough, if we do not vote for persons who have the community's best interests at heart, these assemblies will not work. I implore persons, do not make it political. Don't do it for political favor. Do it for the benefit of your community.
Mr. Gibbs?
Yes, I actually, as Crystal was speaking, I was reminded of a comment that was made in one of the four, where we were initially saying that people would be elected based on a type of a CV that they would put forward. And one of the contributors said that a better word would be community profile over CV, because we don't want to prioritize any kind of academic or professional success. It's as Crystal said, it's what people have done for their community up to that point that should be the overriding concern. Actually, we spoke earlier quite a bit about the distribution of the people's assemblies, but we haven't really spoken that much about the composition. And I find that that's quite an interesting topic, and one that was discussed quite a lot at the different public meetings that we had. For example, the idea of having a certain amount of spaces on each people's assembly dedicated or allocated to students of the UE, students of the BCC, where the people's assemblies then become a conduit or an opportunity for persons of that age to engage in civics and perhaps ultimately get involved in politics later on. Because not all of our students go on to universities where they can be involved in student councils and get experience that way. So I thought that maybe we should discuss a little bit about how the people's assemblies are proposed to be composed.
Okay, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with the People's Business Line right after this. Welcome back to the People's Business Live as we continue to discuss the Thorne Commission on Local Governance, and we are going to go straight to the phone lines. Good evening. You are on the People's Business Live. Good evening, ma'am. Good evening. I think we might be having a little problem with that caller. There are some schools of thoughts in Barbados that are contending that there's a danger in having this commission fall under the aegis of the Ministry of People's Empowerment and Elder Affairs. They contend that there's no real independence as far as that is concerned, and that it should be completely autonomous and free of governmental interference. Contending again that the person who pays the piper usually calls the tune. Your thoughts, Spanner?
Well, the people are calling the tune here. That's why Peter Reeve spent the last year consulting with the people of Barbados. You know, we're only a commission, and we're taking the views of Barbadians, putting it into a report, sending it to government, and hopefully have government within the shortest possible time legislate the existence of people's assemblies. We're only a commission. In fact, let me seize the opportunity to introduce the members of the commission. Crystal, do you have the list there? There's Sherwood McCaskey, which yes.
Yes.
Four
I have the
there.
list.
Crystal, could you give the names, please?
Yes, we have Adrian Donovan, Jennifer Walker, Muhammad Ali Nana, Cheryl Hunt, Peter Skeet, Nizar Richard Carter, and Sherwood McCaskey.
Okay.
And in the event that some persons are shy about saying it, there are several persons on this commission who are not partisan. I hope they don't mind me declaring that publicly.
I'm not.
Okay, no problem.
I'm not.
We have another call on the line. Good evening. You are on the People's Business Live.
Hi. Good evening.
Good evening. Go ahead.
Hi.
Thanks for calling.
To call today to make comments about a topic that Commission raised in his book called "An Urgent Call to the Caribbean." I'm reading the first chapter, page 11. The harsh truth is that an economic and political system is dying, and if nations and leaders do not recognize this reality and take concrete steps to distance themselves from the effects of the death throes they will be dragged down as well. The Caribbean governments need to wake up. If they simply continue to do what they're doing now, their young people will eventually also come to the sense that their future prospects are diminishing rapidly, and they too may eventually feel impelled to take matters into their own hands. I just want to say that this correlates with a passage that I read in the newspaper by a guy named Michael Ray, and it said robust economic and technological development will be driven by a young black ethnic majority, and that raises the fact that the youth will eventually come to power, and they will be the ones to make the change in Barbados.
I didn't hear the last part of your comment.
I just wanted to
That the
say
youth
that
will make the change in Barbados.
I just wanted to say that that correlates with the youth eventually coming to power and changing the country and taking their future into their own hands.
Okay, thank you very much for your call. Panel, young man,
You know,
Encouraging.
David,
Very
you want to go?
encouraging.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, it's very encouraging. It comes back to the initial point I made, that the whole idea of having this kind of system of people participatory local governance is our conviction that the Barbadian people are an extremely well-equipped, well-educated, intelligent talented population that is more than capable of playing a very intimate role in the governance of their country. And this young man is confirming that assessment. And indeed, you know, the point I was making in the book that he quotes is that we can't just be about trying to find some little niche in the economic structure of these big powers whose fortunes are in fact falling, and we therefore have to mobilize the talent that we possess among our population and take care of our own affairs. You know, organize ourselves, deal with our own destiny, and so this system of empowering people and believing that we could have a more people participatory system of governance in Barbados is in tune with that kind of thinking, that idea of popular self-determination.
I want to ask the panel something quickly, because you are, as I said, devolving power away from the central government. So, for example, if you have a burst pipe in the community, if you have a street light that won't fixing, if you have a pothole, nowadays, if you, and for decades, if you call central government, it takes a long time. What difference will this commission make and this initiative make in terms of remedying those problems that affect people on a day-to-day basis, so that we won't have to wait an inordinate length of time to get problems affecting us in community remedied?
Right now, Peter, you can say the request is informally done. Having another tier of government, which is to say having a People's Assembly, makes the request more than casual. It becomes formal. It is a formal request made by one department of government to another department of government. It just happens to be that one of those departments of government is populated by the people, by the community. So that we expect that the call by a People's Assembly to have a road fixed, or to have the bus service improved, or to have the sanitation truck come more often, we suspect that a People's Assembly will be far more persuasive than a casual call coming from a resident in the community, or indeed a parliamentary representative trying to mediate the issue. We expect that a People's Assembly would be far more persuasive because, as I said, it is a tier of government and it is a government department.
In addition, Peter, we anticipate that focal points will be appointed right across the public service. And all the relevant ministries and departments are focal points. That is, specific officers whose mandate will be to engage the representatives of the people's government and of the People's Assembly, and to facilitate these requests for things to be done. But you're also going to find, Peter, for example, the environment subcommittee that will exist. You're also going to find that environment subcommittee is going to have resources that, if there is overgrown bush in a particular area of the assembly area, that or some pile up of unsightly garbage, that subcommittee is going to have resources that it could easily engage some service providers from the community area and deal with the problem itself. So yes, I think what Mr. Thorne says, it is going to be that administrative structure that engages with the relevant government department through the appointed focal point, but you're also going to have aspects of its operations where it can intervene itself and remove that emergency pileup of garbage, for example.
Okay, we have another call on the line. Good evening, you are on the People's Business line.
Hello, good evening, Peter, you, Peter,
good evening, good evening.
Panel. What I really want to know, what difference is this People's Assembly now is going to make from the constituency, what do you call it, reps that they used to have, that normally I wouldn't say that they used to get the job done, because I would say that that was more political than anything else. Because right now I live in a constituency where the minister's personal assistant is doing a very good job, because if you call her about anything in the constituency, she normally do her work and gets the job done. So kudos to her right now. So what I want to know is, how will this People's Assembly become more effective?
Thank you for your call, panel.
I don't have any doubt, Peter, addressing the call, that the People's Assemblies will do a better job at addressing concerns than central government can now, because people, you know, he or she who feels it knows it. So it's a proximity thing. My bigger concern, if I have to express one, is that there might evolve over time disparities between People's Assemblies and how well concerns are being addressed. And I think that goes back to the earlier point about resourcing. And that's why it would be so important to make sure that all of the People's Assemblies are equally resourced in terms of administration, to ensure that parity between them. So you don't get what they call in some other areas, other jurisdictions, postcode lottery, where people want to be living in one area over another because of the ability of the People's Assembly, or in other areas, local authority, to deliver services. So in my mind, these People's Assemblies will deliver better than is being done right now, but we have to ensure that it's evenly delivered across the board.
Okay, we have to take a short break again, and we'll be back with the People's Business Live in just a moment. Welcome back to the People's Business Live as we continue to discuss the Thorne Commission on Local Governance. Just a reminder again that the media conference held earlier today by Minister of Health and Wellness, Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Bostic, is to be rebroadcast at 9:30 p.m. tonight. We're going to go straight to the phone lines. Good evening. You are on the People's Business Live.
Hello. Good evening. Hello. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks for calling.
Hi. I am in total support of the People's Assembly, but there are a couple of things I just want to draw to the Assembly, or to the planners, or to the organizers to the Commission, I should say, of this program. One of the things that we need to do is to entrench into the Barbadian psyche that we are our neighbor's keeper, we are our brother's keeper. And if we start to do that, and I think you need to have a very targeted public relations program where people begin to understand that this is not a political forum, but it is where we as a community take care of each other, take care of the old people, take care of the children, take care of the environment, make sure that those things are done within communities. If we start to do that, my suggestion here is that you get a very targeted public relations program going with some taglines that indicate to Barbadians, this is what we are about, caring for each other, caring for our community, caring for, by extension, our country. And if we do that, then we can be the quality people that we have always promised to be. That's my
And at CBC,
my input.
at CBC, we say
Well
this is
said.
who we are.
Thank you. That's it. Yeah.
Well said. Very well
Thank you very
said.
much.
Okay.
And
Bye-bye.
Peter, just the caller before, just to make the point that the People's Assembly is not going to be taken away the work of the Member of Parliament or the Member of Parliament's aide. You know, their duties carry on. But the People's Assembly is simply bringing a significant number of members of the community together in an organized way to do exactly what that last caller has said, that we take care of each other, take care of our neighborhood. And you know, one of the functions that really excites me is the oversight committees, because, for example, let's take the transport board, where let's say the bus to St. Joseph, that the bus service is deficient. There will be a legally binding protocol that would permit the transport board oversight committee of the People's Assemblies to sit down with the management of the transport board to discuss the deficiency in the bus service to St. Joseph, for example, and to demand results, and if those promised results are not forthcoming, to go back to them for accountability, and ultimately.
David, you said legally binding. Are you going to put it in a white paper? A white paper is really the direction of policy, and if you take it within the court, you know that is legally binding. Are you going to put this in a white paper?
The protocol, whether it's going to be in a white paper, but that will be for the decision of the cabinet of Barbados. But ultimately, the system of People's Assemblies is going to be enacted into the laws of Barbados. So the People's Assemblies should have a legal personality similar to a statutory corporation. And the protocols for engagement between the People's Assembly and, let's say, a government agency, that protocol is going to have to be spelled out in writing, and is going to have to be clear and certain and implementable. You know, so we are not talking about something up in the air. We are talking about something cemented in law and in substantial protocols that will be implemented.
Okay, we have another call on the line. Good evening. You are on the People's Business Line.
Yes, good evening, Peter, and your guest.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, my name is Barbadian, and I was on the Constituency Council of Christchurch South 2 terms. And what I can say that what Ambassador Commission and Rav Thorne is saying is that the Constituency Council serve a very important function in the community.
Turn off your TV. Don't listen to your TV.
I'm saying. I'm saying that.
Go ahead, Mr. Lariat.
Yes, I'm saying that we got a number of things we did a number of things in the community where we did not have to revert to central government. Mr. Commission mentioned, like, overheads, trimming of trees and fixing of certain things in the community, and helping people or ensuring that no one left behind. So what this new initiative is doing or will do is take it to another level, but this time without political interference from, say, the MP for the area. During my time...
I hope you're not indicating political interference before.
In Christchurch South, we did not have political interference. I can assure you of that. We were free to get on with what we were doing. And if this new commission is going to be non-partisan, I'm sure the people of Barbados will benefit tremendously from it. And that is from my personal experience of getting a number of things done here in Christchurch South, which is evident today. So I'm pleased with what is happening.
We have an MP here from the constituency. Let us hear his reaction.
He is a very good constituent, you know. Look, these proposed people's assemblies are fundamentally different from the constituency councils. First of all, you are going to be elected and not selected. Yes, and as I said earlier, we want to distance the people's assemblies from the taint of partisan politics. And one of the things we may have mentioned earlier is that you will not qualify or you will not contest a seat on a people's assembly as a member of any political party. So we are rooting this thing in non-partisan community activity as opposed to partisan activity. And Mr. Laria can feel assured that our proposal is pure and untainted by partisan politics.
I just want to raise something to the panel. Barbadians, we compare everything. So is this complaining now to become the solution?
Could you repeat, Peter? I didn't hear it.
You're breaking up.
Saying that Barbadians saying about everything under the sun. So is this an opportunity that is complaining that you become, instead of part of the problem, you become part of the solution?
That's it. That's it. We can't go forward as simply a complaining society. You know, there has to be a new ethic. This country belongs to us. All of us must take responsibility for this country. It must be all hands on board. Look, we know that we are going to be facing Barbados particularly because of this COVID-19 based crisis. We are going to be facing a very difficult time in the months and years ahead. And therefore, we have to develop a consciousness that says the country doesn't just belong to the 30 men and women in the House of Assembly. The 30 men and women in the House of Assembly don't have all the intelligence and initiative and wisdom in Barbados. The country belongs to all of us. All of us have talents. All of us must have a sense of personal responsibility for our country. And we're going to come together to take control of our own destiny and to, look out for our neighbors, look out for our neighborhoods, and even to go beyond that, to make our own intelligent, creative input into national decision-making, national policy-making, make our contribution to bills that are before the House of Assembly, be able to discuss national issues intelligently and have our ideas taken on board by the House of Assembly and the Senate of Barbados. So it is that level of engagement that we are looking to achieve.
Anyone want to react quickly? Okay, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back with the final segment of the People's Business Live in just a moment. Welcome back to the People's Business Live as we go into the final segment of the Thorne Commission on Local Governance. I just want to check something. A year ago at the launch of the commission, Prime Minister Mayor Amor, and I quote, "Here I stand as Prime Minister of this country, saying to you that the days of all roads leading to the Prime Minister cannot be the model of development that this country must put." You believe that this initiative definitely will put paid to those comments and that this offers Barbadians a new path to progress?
Speaking for myself, Peter. Yes, Crystal, you go, please.
Yes, just remembering some of the comments that we would have received from some MPs that would have attended the town halls, where they expressed concern that this was taking away some of their power. And I want to emphasize to them that if the extent of your power is to organize favors for things like these, then you're missing the bigger picture of what you can be doing to serve your community with the position and the power that you have. All roads should not lead to you, the things that the community can do for themselves. And the times for us depending on those favors to get things done quickly have come to an end. We can do it for ourselves, and we will do it for ourselves.
Mr. Thorne?
Peter, unless you have a caller, someone had referred, and that's very well said, sums up all that we've discussed. Someone had earlier made reference to the age limits. Crystal, do you remember anything about age limits that were proposed in any of the assemblies?
Yes, there was some discussion because of the involvement of students that may be underaged and then having their parental consent and how young some persons would want to go, because we've had persons in St. Lucie, for instance, a 13-year-old who wanted to know if she could participate. But the initial proposal that we had would have been for the age of 16. So we've had those things to think about as well, because should age, if she is 13 years old but she has the capability to be able to contribute, should we be limiting then her from being able to participate and even to learn? Or should we have a junior arm where persons that are under a particular age can be able to learn and watch what happens with these people's assemblies and groom them so that when they do get of age, they will be able to have that training or that upbringing to be able to say, I can participate when they get to that particular age.
I don't see why not, because I started to think that I would become a journalist when I was involved in community work back with the Todd Sports and Cultural Club from back in 1972. And I was only 9 years old. And I believe that they helped to hone my skills. And I have become a journalist now for 37 years. But we do have another caller on the line. Good evening. You are on the People's Business Live.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for calling.
I just wanted to say that I enjoyed the program.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask one or two questions. One, Mr. Thorne mentioned the numbers. He qualified the fact that you're not going to be concerned so much about the quality or the quantity, because you're focusing on the quality. I think that is excellent thinking. However, I heard Mr. Gibbs made a comment that I was a little concerned about, because he said that young people are going to be encouraged to participate in the assembly. However, he made the statement that it can be used as a platform for political aspiration. And I think that is a bit inconsistent. Because if you are trying to avoid partisan political association, the biggest problem with that is the thinking that usually determines the outcome of someone with that kind of an aspiration, in the sense that people tend to think the way that they are. And so if you are politically motivated, then it is actually going to manifest itself in what you do.
Okay, in terms of due process, Mr. Gibbs is here, so we're giving you the right to reply.
Sure. Just to respond, I think what I was saying is that it would give them a good exposure to civics. I don't remember if I actually said political, but I think the normal path right now is people would perhaps work with a political party or an MP, and that would be their path, a young person's path into politics. But I think local government is actually a more innocuous way for young persons to get civic education. And remember that we were saying that their entry point into the People's Assemblies would be their community background and their community work. So I'm not sure that I was saying that it was, or certainly not encouraging a partisan approach to their involvement. No. So,
okay, time is unfortunately coming upon us, so I'm going to give each of you 40 seconds to wrap up in terms of leaving comments to Barbadians about this initiative to put power and independence back into the hands of the people. Who'll be first? Crystal, you'll go ahead.
Sure. Participate and vote for the ones who will best serve your community. I don't think I can say that enough.
Okay, that's a very quick wrap up. Mr. Gibbs?
I think that the political process is a bit alienating in Barbados, and that we can improve democracy by having local government that would encourage diversity. You know, on a neighborhood level, we have involvement from the youth. We have older people. We see a lot more women involved in our neighborhood groups, and I think that this would translate into the People's Assemblies and broaden citizen participation and democracy in Barbados.
Okay, Mr. Barney Gibbs, and you also heard from Crystal Howard, members of the Thorne Commission. Ambassador Commission, Deputy Chairman.
Yes, Peter. I just to touch briefly on the point that Barney was making. I think what Barney was saying was that by having the young students involved, it would be a training ground for national leadership, not necessarily political leadership, but national leadership. They would get a good training and introduction. But my final comment is that Barbados, because of our small size, because of how well organized a community we are, because how good our national communications are, because of how elevated our standards of education and training are. We have a potential for people participatory democracy that we have not yet fully exploited and utilized. And this People's Assemblies is the effort to fully utilize that potential that we do have.
Okay, thank you very much, Ambassador Commission. The final comments are yours, Mr. Ralph Thorne.
For me, this is the most exciting project in democracy in modern Barbados, and I urge Barbadians to do this. I cannot wait to see Barbadians meeting in school halls, in church halls, and discussing their local problems and resolving their local problems. Let's do this, and let us do this soon.
Okay, the final comments there of Mr. Ralph Thorne, Chairman of the Thorne Commission. You also heard on this program from Deputy Chairman and Ambassador to CARICOM, His Excellency David Commission, and members of the Crystal Howell and Barney Gibbs, as we discuss the Thorne Commission on local governance. And we want to thank you who called into the program, and do join us again next week for another edition of the People's Business Live.